That's what they meant. Ray Kaplan, we're going to find out more from her because we are going to talk about students and education and particularly student loans. You think about this class of 2020, the expectations they had coming into one of the best job markets in half a century and how things have changed. And, there's always that sort of the disappointment of not having a graduation and not going through all of that, and you get that piece of it. But even more probably compelling is the fact that they're walking into this kind of a job market and these uncertain times, but what do you do about student loans in this environment? There are some things to do, and that's why we asked Ray to check in with us. Hey, Ray, how you doing today?
Hi, Anna. Great. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk about some of these options. Just what would be the first off thing you would say as they're trying to sort of, everything's going around in their head right now thinking I was supposed to graduate, or you're a parent of somebody who's supposed to graduate, and they're dealing with the student loans?
Well, right. There are a number of really good options. So if you have federal student loans, right now under the CARES Act, there is a suspension of payments that started March 13th all the way through September 30th. So even if your loans were in default, no payments are due and no payments are to be made, and there's no interest that will be accruing on your loan. So that's really good news. It's basically just a nice break from having to worry about federal student loan payments. But again, that's only through September. I should also mention that the Department of Education, that the government sent about $14 billion directly to universities and schools all across the country to give money to students who incurred expenses because of COVID-19. So you need to apply for that money through your school directly through their financial aid office. But if you had to incur expenses, travel expenses, or you had to move out of your dorms unexpectedly and travel somewhere, there's all kinds of money set aside to cover those expenses. You do need to apply for that through your schools. But then for those students who have graduated and are worried about the prospect of maybe not finding a job right away, and they have their federal student loan payments that they know are coming due, remember that under the statute, you have at least 36 months of statutory forbearance where you do not need to make payments. You can apply for it directly through your servicer. We at Kaplan Law Firm help people do that all the time. But the downside on that one is that the interest does continue to accrue. The option that I like even better, though, if you are in a situation where income is very tight, we can most likely get you into a very, very low income-driven payment plan, which is going to be 10% of your gross disposable income, which for many people, if you're not working or if you're only working part-time, that payment might be $0 or $10 per month, and there's no downside. So there's no bad effect on your credit, your current and in good standing. So I would really recommend, if you're worried about, I have a $700 monthly payment coming due for my federal student loans and there's no way I can handle it, and then you see that those charges are racking up, call us or go through your servicer. But I do recommend in these situations, because a lot of the times the servicers are not that well versed, as crazy as that may sound, but they don't give you all of the information on what is available for you for an income-driven payment plan. Because if you are really strapped for cash, or you're unemployed, or you're only employed part-time, most of the time we can get you into a $0 monthly payment plan.
Okay, so when your salary, or you eventually get a better job, or you get more income, it goes up based on that, or how does that work, or does it stay that level for a lengthy period of time?
Well, we can get you into that $0 payment plan, and that will last for a full year. And then under the statute, we have to recertify each year. So once we recertify, then we have to show proof of what your income is at the date of recertification. So exactly as you said, if you have a new job and things have turned around, then that formula, which is basically 10% of your gross disposable income, is going to be applied to your new higher salary. But still results for most people in a very low monthly payment. So I really want the take-home message for your listeners to be, don't freak out. If you have federal student loans, there are a lot of really good options. But not if you have private student loans. If you have private student loans, yeah, that's a different story, because this federal statute does not apply to private student loans. So that means if your lender is Wells Fargo or Discover, any of those places, then I would suggest calling them directly to see what options there are, but you're really limited to the terms that you have within the contract. But we can also take a look and see if we can get you forbearance or better payment terms, depending on what kind of a contract you signed, et cetera. But for federal student loans, which is usually the big chunk of people's student loans, there are really, really good options, so people should not panic. And that also applies to parents who have federal Parent Plus loans. So it's not just that this stuff doesn't just apply to students, it also applies to the parent borrowers as well.
Okay, when you say forbearance, you still have to pay it. It just goes off to the future and you pay it at a later date when things are better. Is that right?
Exactly. It's kind of like they put those months towards the end of the loan, so you get time, kind of a break for making payments. But as we said, interest does continue to accrue on the loans, but it's a good option if there is not another option. But again, I prefer the income-driven payment plan because most of the time we can get you a very, very low, very reasonable monthly payment, and you don't have to worry about the downside of kind of taking a break while interest is accruing.
We're talking with Ray Kaplan of the Kaplan Law Firm. She helps you with student loans and knows all the different scenarios about how you can get them under control and help you make payments and forbearance, as she mentioned. Now, Ray, you were saying that the federal loans are the vast majority. What would you say the difference or the percentages are roughly between those who have federal student loans and those who have the private loans?
From what we see, it's about 70% have mostly federal student loans, especially financing graduate school programs. But for undergrad, the numbers are a little bit less because a lot of the students they're not eligible for federal student loans, or they're only eligible for a very small amount, and that's because for undergrad, there's a cap on the amount that students can borrow, where that cap does not exist for graduate loans. So oftentimes then we'll see student borrowers with, $15,000 or $20,000 in federal student loans, but their parents had to take out, $100,000 in federal Parent Plus loans. But the federal statute applies both to student borrowers and to parent borrowers. So, even if that's the case where your parents have these big Parent Plus loans, there are great options under the federal statute for Parent Plus loans. And one other thing I should mention is that under the CARES Act, even if you had a Social Security offset, meaning they took money out of your Social Security payment or they took your tax refund, if that happened after March 13th, then that money should be refunded to you. If it happened before March 13th, then that money is not going to be refunded to you. But anything like that was a collection activity on federal student loans that happened after March 13th should be refunded to you.
All right, quick question here. My kid's coming back home. Imagine that's a scenario many families are dealing with, to live with us. What about for the income situation you described? Does that include the parent's income when you talk about lowering your rate to that $0 or $10?
No, it does not include the parent's income. So that's a mistake we see all the time where students entering into these income-driven payment plans overstate. They think that they have to submit income from everybody in their family if they're living with their family, but the reality is that the statute only requires what is the student's income, and they go based on your gross income, not your take-home pay. So they want to know what your federal taxable income is. We can also lower the payments if you're married, if you have children. So there are a lot of ways under the statute to get that payment down lower, and we do this all the time. So if you're a student and you want help enrolling in one of these income-driven plans, we can definitely help you with that. You can just give us a call or check out our website at financialrelief.com. But most of the time, it's only your income, and you don't even need to disclose, in most cases, spousal income.
Oh, okay. Awful helpful advice, Ray, as always. Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I mean, it's remarkable. Just being informed on this stuff, it makes such a difference, and so thank you for always keeping us informed on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Ray Kaplan from the Kaplan Law Firm. We're going to get to the top of the hour news coming up in the Northwestern Medicine Newsroom.